When planning any backpacking trip, whether long or short term, it is of vital importance to start researching well in advance your budget. Having a budget will not only save you headaches on the road, but also give you a greater sense of freedom, as your actions won't be dictated from a fear of running out of money. Backpacking for any length of time, you will run into a great many people who have run out of money and find themselves stuck or picking up odd jobs to eat. This could be avoided completely by having a budget prepared in advance, by taking the time before you leave to understand the expenses that you will incur on the road. You can create a comprehensive budget that is going to keep you traveling for as long as you want. It is important to understand that everyone should create a budget. Even if you plan on picking up jobs along the way or stopping for a few months to work in a country with a more favorable currency, you need to have savings and an understanding of how to make that savings stretch for the times when you can't find work, such as if you arrive late somewhere during a country's high season, or if you are in a place where not many jobs are available to backpackers. You should plan a budget for at least 3 months if you plan on picking up work, and try not to dip into savings while working so that you can always have an emergency fund. The budget you create should be all-encompassing and should take into account any expenses which could come up. Aside from just food, transportation, and lodging, you must also take into account visa fees and any taxes you may need to pay to enter and leave the countries which you plan on visiting, or any gifts you may buy for family and friends back home, and the costs to ship these gifts internationally. There are many minor expenses which backpackers tend to incur, and building these expenses into your budget will help you better understand the real cost of what it is going to take to visit somewhere and not just the face value cost. The following list is a good idea of what should be included, but is by no means definitive. You should personalize this list based on what you like to do and how you plan on spending your time while on the road. Everyone's trip is different, and because of this, the costs they incur are going to vary on some levels. So it is important to sit down for yourself and make sure that you have included everything so that no surprise expenses come up which could eat away at your overall budget. Cost of food. Many people like to start with the cost of airfare to get to your destination. Since it is the first cost you are going to incur, then it is the logical place to start. However, if you buy your plane ticket without already having saved for the rest of your trip, then you are running risk of not saving enough before you leave. And this is going to mean coming home early if you bought a one-way ticket, or living on a shoestring budget and being stressed about spending if you have a set amount of time you will be traveling for. If you build your ticket into your budget first and plan on buying the ticket once you get the rest of your money, then you may be quite shocked to find that the ticket you planned on buying has doubled. So it is best to put this expense in the middle or at the end. Instead, consider first the costs that you will rack up once you actually land. Food is going to be one of your biggest expenses, since it is an expense which is incurred multiple times throughout the day. And since it is also an expense that is necessary for survival, it should be high up on your priorities. If you don't have the money to go scuba diving one day, then no big deal. However, if you run out of money to eat, then your trip is going to quickly become a hard lesson in life and not the amazing adventure which you had planned for. For the purpose of listing your expenses, food and alcohol should be separated. Food is a requirement for everyone, however not everybody is going to have alcohol as an expense on their trip. For people who do drink, however, this can become a major cost, and therefore you do not want it eating into your food budget. To come up with the right number for the cost of food, you need to take a few things into consideration. The first being the time of year you will be traveling and the area you will be traveling to. If you are going to be in a country during its high season, then you are going to pay more for food than during the low season. If you will be there during the high season, you should add $1 or $2 to prices so that you get a more complete picture. Next, you should look at individual prices in each country you are going to in order to understand the variation in price throughout a region. Some countries will have many low-cost options for eating, and others are going to be pretty consistent, with mid-range prices or higher, and very few low-cost options. You don't want to experience the shock of using low-cost countries to plan your trip, only to have one of the countries you visit be extremely expensive by comparison to your budget, such as the difference between prices in Nicaragua and Costa Rica. If you plan for prices in Nicaragua and not Costa Rica, and you visit both, then your budget is going to be decimated before you realize it. Next, you need to figure out what level you will be spending at. If you are on a shoestring budget, you are obviously going to be looking more into low-cost options. However, if you have the ability to save more money before you leave, then you may have more medium-cost options in your budget. No matter what level your budget is, however, plan for spending money on a few nice meals every once in a while. It can do wonders to lift your spirits on the road to have a great meal. Cost for hostels and hotels be. Your next biggest expense is going to be hostels and hotels or other expenses related to where you will stay. Many people plan on using websites like Couchsurfing.com or camping with a hammock to minimize these expenses. However, it is important to still plan your budget, as if you are going to have to pay every night for a room. As with the food budget, you should look up what the average cost of cheap, medium priced, and expensive options for each country you plan on visiting. Look around at the cost in various cities in each country also to get a better idea of what you will be paying for rooms or bunks. Also, as with food, make sure that even if you are planning on a shoestring budget, that you set aside a few days to pamper yourself. Traveling isn't as fun if you can't spoil yourself, and after living in dorm rooms and camping on beaches for a month or more, you might really appreciate a nice hotel with your own private room for a night. A good tool to help you research hostels and some hotels is hostelworld.com. You can easily use the website to find the average cost of hostels in a given area, and will be able to more accurately come up with a number for how much you will be spending per night on living. Always make sure that you are looking for ways to save money with your hostel. For example, hostels and hotels will be cheaper during the low season, and you can even sometimes negotiate a cheaper price than advertised if you try. Also, by booking at a place that offers complimentary breakfast, you can save money on meals. Remember, just as tiny expenses add up and turn into big expenses, tiny savings here and there can add up as well. Transportation after arrival. See, this does not include your departure and return ticket to get you to your destination. This is strictly your transportation between destinations after you are already on the road, and includes all plane and bus tickets as well as taxi and public transportation costs. This one is a bit harder to get an accurate number for, because it is impossible to know how many times you are going to need transportation while on your trip. The best advice that can be given here is to figure out the guaranteed costs you are going to have, such as a bus or plane ticket between two cities you want to visit, or a plane ticket between countries. After that, you should look at the costs of cabs and public transportation in the countries you will be in, and set a daily budget for transportation. It is best to be very liberal with your numbers, as saving up and having more money on your trip is going to be better than not having enough and having to cut into a different part of your budget. Drinking budget. As mentioned above, some of the items on this list are not going to apply to everyone, and instead can be substituted for other things based on the individual. Having a drinking budget is one of these items. Not everyone is going to be drinking while backpacking. However, for those who will be, make sure to figure out a daily or weekly drinking budget so that you don't end up having to dip into your food budget. To better figure out a drinking budget, look at the average cost of beer and liquor in each of the countries you will be visiting. Take this average and then use it to figure out your Average cost per day, based on your own drinking habits. Add together that cost for each of the countries you will be in, and if drinking is something which you will be partaking in a lot, then add a little more to that number. There are ways that you can save money on drinking while you backpack, which can help reduce your costs if you are diligent about your spending. Sightseeing expenses. Come up with an estimate of the entry fees for all of the sites that you want to go see. You will easily be able to find online the cost to enter various attractions and landmarks and can add up an estimate of all the sites you think you will be going to. Make sure to include everything from museum entry costs, landmarks, historic destinations, national parks, and the cost of any guided tours you may want to go on. You can save money in this part of the budget by going to see sites and landmarks that are free and by going on free group tours. Entertainment costs. Your entertainment costs include everything from admission fees to clubs, concert tickets, movie tickets, etc. Anything that isn't included in the sightseeing budget, that is an expense related to entertainment, goes into this budget. As these expenses are going to vary dramatically per person, it is hard to come up with an exact number. However, try to think of the things which you enjoy doing at home that you will probably also do on the road, such as working out at the gym, going to the spa, or getting a massage, watching movies at a theater, gambling, scuba diving classes, or free dives, and any other activity you will be participating in, which could cost you money. You may be a little short with your final budget of the amount you actually spend, but assigning a number for these expenses cuts out the risk that you are going to have to dig too deeply into your other budgeted items to pay for them. Flights to and from home. Probably the largest single expense you will have throughout your entire trip is the flight to get you to and from your backpacking destination. As mentioned above, it is recommended that you put this expense in the middle or at the end of your budget, after the necessities of food, shelter, and transportation after your arrival, so that you leave yourself enough room after booking your flight to save up for these expenses. Do your best to save money on flights to cut down on overall costs. Also make sure that you cut down on other expenses related to flying, such as avoiding bringing too many bags and having to check one in. If you can score a pair of cheap round-trip or one-way tickets, then you have already saved a great deal on the overall cost of your trip, which you can then put towards the rest of your expenses. Shopping. You should always take into consideration that at some point in time, while you are backpacking, you are probably going to have to go shopping for something. Whether it be new flip-flops, or a swimsuit to replace a damaged pair, or for shampoo and deodorant, you are going to have various costs arise for necessary items. And as with everything else listed above, having a special section in the budget keeps you from dipping into other categories. Not included in the shopping category are gifts and souvenirs for other people. This should be a category of its own. Your shopping category should include only expenses for yourself, for clothing and other products which you need in your day-to-day life. To get a better understanding of how much you should put into this category, think about how long you will be out for and how much stuff you are going to have to replace. Take into consideration such things as how often you will be going through shampoo and soap, or which pieces of clothing and equipment are most likely to get broken or lost and need replacing on the road. While no one wants to have to replace their equipment, more often than not something will need replacing while you are backpacking, and by planning for these unexpected expenses, they will come as less of a shock and be less of a drain on your overall budget. Visas and entry and exit costs. Each country you visit is going to have different rules and regulations regarding visa costs and entry and departure taxes. Oftentimes the entry and departure taxes will be taken care of in the cost of the plane ticket if you are flying into or out of a country. But in some countries, such as Costa Rica, this has to be paid as a separate tax at the counter before leaving. So make sure that you look up the individual costs for each country you plan on visiting, as visas can cost anywhere from $40 to a few $100, and entry and departure taxes can be anywhere from $10 to $30 or more in some places. If you will be visiting a number of countries, these expenses can add up quickly. Also, make sure that you do not need to apply in advance for a country's visa. In some countries that require you to pay for a visa, you can do so at the border or at the airport when flying in. However, other countries will require you to apply for a visa in advance, and not doing so can cause you to have to alter your plans. Gifts and shipping costs. It's always nice to be able to buy and send home gifts to your family and friends. However, with only a backpack to carry things around, you may run out of room if you will be traveling for a while, which means that you will be needing to ship things home. To figure out the cost of gifts and shipping for your budget, first figure out how many and what types of gifts you are going to buy. Obviously, a piece of jewelry for mom is going to run more than that cool shot glass for your buddy, so go through and take into account what you would buy for each person and try to assign a reasonable monetary value to each gift. Then add these together for the total cost of gifts. It is good to be a little liberal with these numbers. Always better to have more than necessary than to be lacking in funds. As for shipping costs, this is a bit trickier. The best way to cut down on shipping costs, which will be expensive, is to try to ship as many things as possible at one time. If this means that you have to hold a gift for a little while until you have more things to ship, then do it. This could save you up to $30 or $40 in some cases. Since you don't know the exact monetary cost of shipping something by country, it should be assumed that your shipping expenses will be between $30 and $60 per package. Again, it is good to be liberal with these numbers. Add the two numbers, cost of gifts and cost of shipping, together to get your total for this category. Emergency fund. Smart backpackers come prepared and ready for anything. And part of being fully prepared for a backpacking trip is to make sure that you have an emergency fund in a separate account from your main funding for when something happens. In a worst case scenario, your money could be stolen or held, placed for whatever reason on your card, causing you to not have funds. In this kind of situation, you will want to have an emergency fund, which you have immediate access to, that can tide you until you can sort everything out and have access to your funds again. This emergency fund should have enough for a plane ticket home or a month of traveling, and should not be touched unless necessary. Time on the road. Since some categories will be one-time expenses and others will be expenses only incurred on some days and not others, you should go through on a category by category basis and figure out the Y variable for each one. Try and separate the one-time expenses first, such as your flight to your destination and back, as well as your visa and entry and departure taxes. Then figure out your other categories that are going to have a set budget, such as your gifts and shipping budget and your emergency fund. Next, go through and figure out your multi-day expenses, such as your drinking budget and your entertainment and sightseeing budgets. And finally, go through the daily costs, such as food, lodging, and transportation. After you figure out the cost in each of these categories, you can add it all together so that you will have a general idea of your total trip expenses. The formula would look something like this: XE plus XI plus XI plus XI plus E plus F plus G plus H plus I plus J plus K equal ESTIMATED trip total. And remember that just because you have a budget doesn't mean that you should be a slave to it. Creating a budget for backpacking is meant to give you more freedom, with the knowledge that no matter what you want to do, you have planned for and have the money to do it. If something comes up that wasn't in the budget, or if you decide to go to a country not originally planned for, then do it. Backpacking is meant to be a freeing and liberating experience, and being a slave to numbers isn't going to help you with that. Your budget should be more of a detailed guide to help you out than a limiter on the activities you take part in and what you decide to do while backpacking.